Welcome back to the Talking Sales series, and I've got Jim Duffy again. Welcome to Down Under, Jim. I'm talking here from down here in Brisbane, Australia.
Well, it's a beautiful day in Chicago, so I'm glad to be on the in the Western Hemisphere today. It wasn't quite as nice as it was the last time we spoke, but it's a beautiful day here.
As this is our third call in a series of three. The first was it's about prospecting. It's about cold calling and getting a result in an outbound approach to a potential client. And just a reminder to my listeners is Jim achieves a hit rate of 6 out of 10 calls when he gets in front of somebody, when somebody answers the phone. 6 out of 10 success rates where you lock in a meeting, which is the service you're providing to your client. And so we talked about how you target to get that. We talked about the research you do to achieve that. Now I want to talk about how you actually conduct that call. Can you run us through that?
Sure. Well, let me just first start by saying I load that database of one persona into Phone Burner, which is the tool that I use. It's a high-speed dialer. But let's go through the call. So Phone Burner acts like any other phone where you hear the ringing. And as soon as I hear the ringing, I see the person's biography pop up on my second screen. So I'm immediately calling one type of person all day long. So in this particular case, let's say I'm calling on intellectual property attorneys in the music business. And why am I doing that? Because I've got an expert that understands the damages as it relates to damages on intellectual property in the music business. So I'm calling that type of attorney all day long. So I'll say,
and your target is to set up a whole lot of appointments for that client of yours.
Absolutely. So I'll call the attorney and I'll say, hi, my name's Jim Duffy. I'm calling on behalf of John Smybert, who's one of the top forensic accountants as it relates to intellectual property in the music business. Karen, I see that you were involved in the Guns N' Roses case 2 years ago with Axl Rose, where you actually defended him. Reason I'm calling, John would be delighted to meet you sometime the latter part of March at the Beverly Hills Club for coffee or lunch, or if we were in Brisbane, maybe meet for tea. But anyway, so I basically kind of tee up something about the attorney that relates back to what my client does.
Now that Guns N' Roses case had popped up on your screen. You're able to talk about something very specific to that person that would get their attention. And you've got all the other information sitting there necessary to have the right conversation. So typically what happens next? So you've made that first statement, you grab their attention. It'll grab anybody's attention if you approached it that way with that level of information that you've been able to share. So what happens next normally?
Well, everybody talks about pattern interrupt. Well, not only do I give them a pattern interrupt that's like, like you've heard people say, give me 27 seconds to tell you why I called. Well, I actually give them a pattern interrupt that talks about them specifically.
Very, very important. And, how often do we get calls? And just to give an example, you get a call and somebody says, oh, we want to talk to you about your electricity bill. Well, I don't want to talk to you about my electricity bill. F off. So
Absolutely.
It's got to be about them, doesn't it?
It absolutely has to be about them. And that's the connection that you make. The visceral connection is about them. When you start talking about them, all of a sudden that very tense call, just the sea level drops. And all of a sudden you're having a conversation at that point. And what does happen, John, typically is the person's a little bit flummoxed because how does this guy know about me? And I'll say, hold on a second. Could you just repeat what you just said? Because they're a little bit like, they're like, oh my God, what is this guy just said something. So I have to slowly repeat what I've just said and say it slowly and make sure and say, that's why the reason I'm calling. So it's very clear why I'm calling. I'm not, fooling, or I'm basically telling them the reason I'm calling, and I'm talking about them as it relates to the value proposition. So instead of talking about their company or talking about I'm talking about what they did, the things that are important to them. And when you talk about the things that are important to them, that changes the whole atmosphere of the call.
But I'm assuming at that stage you don't get 100% or 60% as you get of people saying, okay, that sounds like a good idea. All right, let's lock a date into my diary. They're not going to do that just after that much of the conversation.
No. What will happen after we go into the second phase of the call is they'll say, well, tell me a little bit about your expert. And then I will, I've usually have a case study right next to me. I'm only calling intellectual property attorneys in the music business. So I've got 4 or 5 different cases that relate back to what this attorney does. So they're like, wow, this guy really does have the chops to help me. So
these are cases that your client has participated in.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So the cases that they're involved in, we'll talk about them, and then I'll politely ask the question again, usually at the end, and say, after there's a pregnant pause and it seems appropriate, I'll say, would it be feasible to meet sometime at the end of March? And then what I do is I don't say a thing after that. I just stop.
The power of silence.
I just stop. And they answer yes.
60% answer yes.
60% of the live conversations. And I just want to be clear on that. So I might have, your people that are doing cold calling, what I would say is every market is a little bit different. So I get 6 out of 10 in my market. Your market might not be 6 out of 10. So I'm not trying to say that you can work this magic in every market. But what I can say categorically is that you can do 3x higher than what you're doing today by using this type of a process. And it takes work. It's not like you got to create the domain expertise. That doesn't happen overnight. You have to work at it. So, again, this is not a magic bullet. The magic is becoming a domain expert and using the tools, using the processes, and really caring about the people that you're trying to work with. And if you don't have that passion and care for that person, you're never going to be able to do those types of numbers. But if you are truly passionate about what you do, you can 3x what you're doing today rather than using a phone like this. So say you're using a phone like this and you make 100 calls. It is complete drudgery because you're making call after call after call. And I'm using a high-speed dialer. So when I get to a voicemail, I just go to the next one. I use speed and quality in order to drive more live conversations in an hour, which in essence, but I have to have the quality aspect of it. So that's why we do the thin slicing of, hey, I see you worked on the Guns N' Roses case. The magic is in that phrase because I'm talking about them.
Let's just go back a step. You said you get 6 out of 10 where they answer the phone. And then you just mentioned you get a lot of calls go to voicemail. And, I'm guessing, at least 9 out of 10 go to voicemail on when you're dialing out, right?
Sure.
So what do you do when you go to voicemail?
I simply go to the next call. I don't leave a voicemail. And now I don't go right back to call that person so I usually wait at least 30, sometimes 45 days before I call that number again. And the other thing that I do.
Sorry, why is that, Jim?
I take more of a stealth approach, because if I'm getting 6 out of 10 live conversations turning into appointments, I don't want to be perceived as this person who's constantly almost like spamming them in terms of trying to call after call, calling them so many times that they're like, oh my God, will this guy stop calling me?
And you've got enough out there to call where they do answer the phone that you keep getting the numbers you're after. So let me just drill down a little bit. So the phone gets answered, but it's not the attorney. It's not the person you're targeting. It's an assistant or some other person. What do you do?
I will typically talk to them in the same way that I just did just now, and they'll be like, "Wow, this guy really knows about John Smibert's business," and they'll say, "Hold on a second, let me see if he's available."
Yeah.
Now, in those cases, certainly what I do is I separate the direct phone numbers from the ones where there's an admin that's involved. So, and I categorize that. Every call that I make, I categorize whether it's a direct dial or it's an admin that's going to be involved in that call.
And that all comes from the research you've done.
Right. We can determine that, and I have a different strategy for an admin. But again, I'm also finding out what their name is, because in that particular type of call, it might be a multi-call process. So enlisting that admin is also important. So I'll actually take that admin's information, send it back to my folks in India, and they will gather information on that person as well. So,
Okay.
So again, now I'm not going to get into the realm of creepiness where I'm talking about their kids or anything like that. But if there's anything that's in a business, from a business purpose that's in their biography, I'm going to talk to them about that. I'll say, "Hey, I saw that you were involved in that you helped organize all of the attorneys in your organization on a particular fundraiser day," or whatever it is that they did. And then all of a sudden they're like, "Wow, this guy really cares about me." So, and I do care about people. I mean, obviously I want to do well with what I'm doing, but don't you want to have good conversations, or do you want to have ones that are very stiff? I don't like stiff conversations. I like to have conversations like you and I are having, something that's warm, that's friendly, that's real.
And your voice is also so important in this process, isn't it? I talked to Denis Champagne in Canada, who's an expert on the voice on the call, and I listened to your voice, and I think that that's a very important part of the call as well.
Yeah, I don't come off as frenetic or real pushy or anything like that. I'm very conversational in what I do. People will say you need an A-type player. Well, you do have to have your A game, but you don't want to come off so overpowering that all of a sudden it becomes not like a conversation, but a sales call. So I'd rather have a conversation.
You need to be authentic. And as my friend Kian McLaughlin, in all the research he's done, is the best salespeople tend to be the humble ones, tend to be the ones slightly quiet, good listeners, curiosity, all that sort of stuff, versus the overpowering sales approach, which I don't call sales at all.
Yeah, I think curiosity is, if I was going to say one thing, curiosity is a trait that needs to be involved in a salesperson's background, because if you're not curious, you can't do this job as well as you. That's a critical element of sales. Curiosity and integrity. You put those, and being humble. You don't have to be the hero. They're the hero.
Jim, I'm sitting here so curious. I've got a million questions, but we try and keep these discussions to 5 minutes each, so everybody can get the gist of it and get on with their life. But if people are interested, you happy to have people contact you?
Oh, absolutely. They can reach me on LinkedIn, and they can also reach me by phone, 708-629-9333. Or they can reach me on my website, which is www.litigationconnection.com. That's a long one. My email is jim.duffy, Duffy, @litigationconnection.com.
Jim, thank you very much for your time and sharing your stories. I've got a million other questions, but I don't want to go into too much depth. And those that are interested will certainly get back to either me or you. So thank you for that. By the way, everybody, that number Jim gave is a US number. So you need to put a country code 1 in front of that.
Thank you.
Jim, I really appreciate your time and sharing your expertise and why you get such an amazing result for your clients. I think we all learn a lot from that. Thank you.
It's been terrific, John. Thank you.
This episode of Talking Sales is sponsored by the authors of the new page-turning sales novel, The Wentworth Prospect. In the words of one reviewer, it's B2B sales mastery delivered in an ingenious, engaging, and hugely entertaining way. Get it now at your favorite book retailer.